Cool. So let's see, to start with, I think I'll have on my list Brandon Jones. So if you wouldn't mind going first, Brandon, that would be terrific.
Okay, thank you, Val. Thank you for the invitation to participate on the panel, and it's good to see so many experts on the panel, those that I have met before and some that I'm just meeting now. So it's nice to meet all of you, and to all the students, the participants, interns, and such. Good morning, good afternoon to you. So briefly, as Val mentioned, I'm Brandon Jones, and I'm a program director. Anyway, Brandon Jones at the National Science Foundation, and I'm in the Directorate for Geosciences. I work in the front office, and I manage the education, workforce training, broadening participation programs, mostly for the directorate. I get to work across the 3 divisions and the Office of Polar Programs within the Director for Geosciences with other colleagues who, as part of their program portfolio, have education and training programs like postdoctoral fellowships, like the REUs, et cetera. My background is marine larval ecology with just a tiny bit of phys-osh in there. So like Val and many others, I've trained as a scientist, but never was an academic. When I finished my master's degree, well, let me back up just quickly. I attended the Lincoln University in Pennsylvania, which is an HBCU for undergrad, and I had majored in biology. I always had an interest in marine biology, but like many HBCUs, Lincoln did not have any kind of geoscience program, but I did have an advisor who was a larval ecologist from Rutgers. And so that's how I was introduced to research in the marine realm, or mainly the aquatic realm. And from Lincoln, I went to the University of Delaware and I received my master's. And I then went to teach high school in Maryland for 5 years. And after teaching high school, I went back to Delaware to work on my PhD. And once I finished my PhD, I got what they call a policy postdoc at the Environmental Protection Agency in DC. And I worked in the Office of Research and Development, mainly in the grants program office, where the STAR fellowships and STAR grants were. So that's where I got my program expertise. And then in 2016, in the spring, I was able to come over to NSF in a permanent position, and that's where I am now. And so Val, I think you asked something that I like about the job.
Yeah, maybe a frustration, to kind of balance it out a little.
Right. So what I like about working at the National Science Foundation is I have an incredible amount of flexibility and autonomy as far as developing programs, staying in contact with the community, like early career professionals like yourselves, or PIs, faculty, researchers, et cetera. And that allows me and the team that I work with to develop programs and opportunities to support you all in what it is that you're doing, and to push forward in this area of broadening participation and all the different facets that it brings. So the flexibility and the allowance for creativity is what I really like. Frustrations, I would say, I am at a federal agency. So depending on the priorities of the administration that control the executive branch, there could be opportunities. I would say all are opportunities. Some are clearer than others, and some you could just move forward on. But sometimes there are administrations in place where you have to be really creative about how you move forward on the opportunities, because priorities are a bit different. So the cycle of politics and how that plays, and certainly with science, can be very frustrating at times. But overall, I like what I do.
Thank you very much. That's really it's nice to hear about what what you love the most. It's inspiring and encouraging. Thanks. Okay, Jenny Nakai and then Sarah Woods. Welcome, Jenny.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jenny. It's nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I am a geophysicist at the U.S. Geological Survey Alaska Volcano Observatory. So that's a joint cooperative between the Alaska Department of Geology and Geophysics, the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and the USGS. So it's kind of like 3 different arms working together to observe the volcanoes in Alaska and the Aleutian Islands. So I started very recently in late April, and I guess to go back a long ways, I got my degree in my bachelor's degree in mining engineering in 2008 from Colorado School of Mines, and I worked in a mine for several years, an underground gold mine and an underground platinum palladium mine. And then I worked for the tribal government for the Navajo Nation because I'm Navajo, which is Native American, in case you guys don't know. But it's in New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah at the reservation. So I worked for the tribal government for the EPA for 2 years. And that was really cool experience. And then I went to University of Colorado Boulder to get my PhD in geophysics in earthquake seismology. And after I did that, I got my PhD in 2018. I was an NSF postdoc for 2 years at the University of New Mexico, working on Alaska data. And then I was a research assistant professor, so just funded by grant funding from NSF. So a soft money research position for 1 year. And then I got this position, which is a permanent position with the federal government. But yeah, so I am doing what I'm trained for to some extent. I'm an earthquake seismologist, but I'm also an operational seismologist here at AVO. So AVO is tends to be a little more operational than some of the USGS branches, just because there is so much work related to monitoring these volcanoes. There are several that are active, and the FAA, because they have so many planes flying over to Japan, they really want to know if there's any, ash issues that could impact their airplanes. And so we have to put out advisories in case we think ash plume heights are going to be at a certain level, or there's going to be an explosion, volcanoes to watch out for. So there's a lot of operational things going on where we need to actively be monitoring. So in that respect, it's a lot different from a research position where, like in my PhD, I think I was working with data from 2008 to 2010, and my paper finally got published in 2015. So you're doing a lot of work after the fact, and it's a lot of research. As far as cool things about my job, I don't know if I can, I think I could share my screen. So this is field work that I did just a couple of weeks ago.
Wow.
But this is going around Shishaldin, which is a volcano on Unimac. And this one isn't actually that active right now, but it is actively degassing. And so we were doing a gas survey to record the SO2, the CO2, and you can see the small plume. So in order to get a good sample, we had to get pretty close to the top of the volcano, and you can see there's a fumarole, and then we don't want to know what's down there. But you're in a helicopter. Doing that kind of field work is really awesome. So we were on a boat, and then there was a helicopter on the boat that would land and then take off and take people to different spots and have them fix equipment and things like that. So I get to work with some of the most experienced professionals as far as how to install this kind of equipment. I also like the actual work itself. It's right up my alley. I like coding things, a lot of things like trying to monitor the state of health of different instrumentation, trying to figure out ways to make information easier to digest for operations folks, managers, things like that. It's something that I enjoy. So, and I also, do research, and I also am still part of a lot of like outreach activities. Some of it is NSF funded, or it is NSF funded actually. So, and I still have like collaborators with academia. So I kind of get to do a lot of things. So one of the things I wanted to mention, the last thing is like, so I actually thought about it. I've actually done the trifecta of like industry, government, and academia. So maybe not for long periods of time, but
Yeah. Well,
yeah, cool.
it would be great if you could just touch on, maybe even now, just very briefly, that you've just left academia and how a little bit, just about why and if you can. I know that's a big question, but.
Yeah, I think I could do it just real quick. Like, so I'm actually kind of still part of it. So I'm still active in some grants, and I still have a lot of work to finish up. And, a lot of those collaborators I can continue to work with here at USGS,
Cool.
Especially if I move into a research position sometime later, if the opportunity comes up. But yeah, I've noticed I'm starting to get less white hairs because it's actually a little bit stressful to support yourself through grant funding alone, because you're responsible for writing the grants, coming up with the ideas, finding people to work with who are supportive of your future, and then also doing the work to follow up with the grants and trying to make sure that you're doing it at a level that you're happy with. So that can be a little taxing on you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And we can ask more questions later. Okay, next up, Sarah, and then Tom.
Good morning. So my name is Sarah Woods. My position is somewhat similar to Jenny's. I am a research scientist at a private company called Stratton Park Engineering Company, or SPEC for short, that's based out of Boulder, Colorado. The company specializes in cloud microphysics. It's kind of a unique institute in that it is a small company. It's about 18 people currently. So what we do is we have a line of instrumentation that we outfit on aircraft for studying cloud particles. It'll take pictures of the particles, and you can measure all kinds of things about the hydrometeors within the clouds. So part of the business is building these instruments, writing small business innovative research grants to get funding from Department of Energy or NASA or others to develop new instrumentation. But part of it, which I'm a little more involved in, is writing proposals, science proposals, to the National Science Foundation and NASA, DOE as well. And we participate in these larger field projects that will have 1 to 3 aircraft that are studying any aspect of atmospheric science. We may have a smaller role that's just kind of providing a product of cloud observations, or we may have like key science questions that we're trying to answer. So it is a very unique kind of niche area. But my background, I'm actually not trained in atmospheric science. I got my undergraduate in electrical engineering from Colorado State. Decided I didn't want to do straight up engineering. So I went and got my doctoral degree from University of Miami at the Rosenstiel School in marine physics. So oceanography, turbulence, ocean optics, that type of thing. I then went on to do a postdoc with the Naval Research Lab. So moved from academia to government a little bit. So that postdoc was at Stennis Space Center on the Gulf Coast. And then once I finished up my postdoc, I decided I wanted to move back to Colorado because I'm a very outdoorsy person, hiking, skiing, whatnot. And so I then transitioned from oceanography into atmospheric science to take my current position, and I've been at it for about 8 years. So I am really happy with the path and the experiences I've had. One of the things I really like about my job is the field work, like Jenny showed. I don't have any cool stuff prepped up to show you, but you know, on the oceanography side, I got to go out on the ships and make measurements, dropping instrumentation down into the water. Once I moved over to atmospheric science, we worked with manned and unmanned aircraft. We get to fly, you know, flights all over the globe. We just finished one that was based out of Colorado, but we've been to the Arctic and overseas and all over the place. So there will be, you know, a couple months of the year maybe that we're out there collecting data, and the rest of the time we'll be back in Boulder, pouring through that data, analyzing it, cleaning it up, writing papers, writing the next proposals, that type of thing. One of the challenges of my job is, so it sounds kind of academic, everything I've described so far probably, but working for a private company, you are a little more isolated from the collegial environment you would have with an academic position at a university or even a government lab. With it being such a small company, we are kind of isolated, and I kind of miss that the scientific discussion back and forth with colleagues and whatnot. I mean, I get that at conferences and when I'm in the field, you know, with our colleagues from universities and government labs and such. But in the day-to-day with a small company, there's only like 3 scientists in our company. So you miss out on a lot of that. But otherwise the job is pretty fun.
Cool. Wow. That's very inspiring to hear that you moved from engineering to, you know, marine and oceanography to atmospheric science with all these different agencies. And thank you. It's also great to hear about jobs that are in the private sector. We don't get to hear enough about them. Okay. Next, I'd like to introduce Tom Bigford, who works for the Coastal Society with the Coastal Society.
Thank you, Val, and thanks for the opportunity. I've got a little bit of intersections with the previous speakers. Like Brandon, I started as a marine invertebrate zooplankton biologist, ecologist, way back. That was with EPA. And then I transitioned to work within the private sector with a consulting firm, and then got into the federal government. And I stayed there for 38 years and just retired a few years ago. So I work with the Coastal Society, but I'm a volunteer. I'm retired, although sometimes I wonder if I really am. I'm probably working 30 hours a week now, but not getting paid by anybody. Still fun. I, as I said, started as a scientist and then evolved into away from the field and into the lab and then into management and policy issues. So most of my career, everything except the first 3 years with EPA, was working on resource management issues in an office setting, which is fine because I have an inner ear problem and I get seasick. So a desk job worked fine for me. I did that for a long time, mostly in Washington, DC, but also in Seattle and the Northeast. And that was great. I have absolutely no dislikes for anything that I was doing. It was just fantastic. When I was in 6th grade, I read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and I was hooked, literally. And I wanted to do anything I could related to the ocean. And that's right where I ended up. I ended up being very fortunate. I was the only person in the country that had the job that I had, and that was in charge of habitat protection for fish, marine mammals, sea turtles, all sorts of critters that NOAA had jurisdiction over, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. That's where I spent most of my career. So that I'm a tree hugger at heart, ocean hugger, and so the opportunity to work on the protection side instead of restoring after unfortunate events was perfect for me. I spent a lot of time doing that, always with one foot in the science, but but 1 foot and 2 hands in the policy and management. Among the science issues I got to be involved in over the years was NOAA's Coral Reef Program, NOAA's program on deep sea mining and ocean engineering, ocean energy, some of which were a little bit on the table 20 or 30 years ago and now coming back, like deep sea mining and certainly all the ocean energy opportunities out there, especially wind. So lots of physics, lots of geology, lots of interactions with the public, lots of desperate need to represent the habitat of the fish that don't vote, the ecosystem levels and on up to the harvested species, or the the species that people think about, like whales. One little dislike, I guess, worth mentioning is that I worked with the National Marine Fisheries Service, part of NOAA, and their focus is on harvesting fish. If it's alive, go after it. And I was of the opposite, sort of approaching it from a different perspective, focused on the habitat of those fish. So it was always something to do whether it was being harvested or not. But the focus in the agency on harvesting fish made it a little bit difficult sometimes to get my non-harvestable issues on the table and funded. A little bit of a frustration, but not much at all. In retirement, I'm focusing on one thing that really kept chipping away at my brain over the years, and that's I was always frustrated as a hiring official that there was like no opportunity at all to increase diversity. In the very beginning, diversity was hiring anybody who was not a white Vietnam veteran, because they had a lot of advantages as a vet, and there were a lot of them, and they went back to school with the VA bill. And basically just dominated the workforce. So when I was hired, diversity was hiring a woman. But by the time I retired, diversity was hiring a man. I left an office of 27 people and there were 25 women. Huge difference in the span of my career. But there still was very little color among applicants and certainly among employees. So what I'm focusing on now in retirement, and what got me working with Val and Elise, is conducting workshops with the Coastal Society to get the word out there about different job opportunities and how you get them, how you prepare yourself personally, but how you also identify the positions and how you actually get your foot in the door with a federal agency. That's been my focus. I had a little bit of time with a consulting firm, but that was in the late 70s. So my focus now is more with getting a job with the feds, but also a lot of it applies to the private sector. I think I'll stop there. Anything else you want me to cover, Val?
No, that's terrific. That was great to hear. Thank you.
Yeah.
And it brings to mind the issue of having your values align with where you work, and how you were, a bit frustrated with that, but that you were able to do your work was on the preservation. But I can see how that would be hard if you were disconnected, or wasn't connected like that. Thank you. Okay, next up, Rennie, and then Aaron.
Cool, thanks, Val. And I can pick up on some of the offshore wind threads that Tom was laying down. So, hi, my name is Rennie Meyers. I'm the Federal Affairs Manager for Orsted, or if you're Danish, Orsted, which is the US subsidiary of a Danish offshore wind and renewable energy company that is currently developing almost 4 gigawatts of renewable energy off the East Coast and around the United States. So as a Federal Affairs Manager, what I do is engage with our congressional allies and friends and foes to try to advocate for renewable energy, whether that's industrial policy or maritime policy or ocean conservation policy. I cover maritime and fisheries and ocean conservation, and so my job is to ensure that we're aligned with our ENGO partners as we advance the solutions that we've agreed to for our wind projects, and make sure that we're mitigating any potential harms, as many potential harms as might happen through the development of an offshore wind farm, which are big projects that are going to take a lot of hands on deck to make happen. And I think for me personally, I want to make sure that I do my job well and that I'm helping advance the interests of this industry that I think is going to provide a bulk of the clean electrons that we need. But it's also hard to work for a company when there are all sorts of other pressures on their bottom line that you're responsive to, if not responsible for. So it's about navigating my own principles as someone who cares about the marine environment, and as an anthropologist, and ensuring that I do justice to those things for myself and for those themes as much as I get my job done. So I'm happy to talk about any of that. I'm happy to talk more about permitting and how, if you get a master's degree, how you can leverage that into some of those degrees as well.
Thank you, Rennie. It's good to hear about how you're following your heart while you're doing all of this work. Okay, next up is Aaron Pina, works at NASA.
Hi, everyone. I'm Aaron Pina, as Val just mentioned. My pronouns are he, him. The word, if you don't remember anything, I want you to remember mentorship and the importance of mentorship and mentors. I currently work at NASA headquarters in the Earth Science Division as a AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellow. And I work as a deputy program manager or program scientist, which at other institutions you may hear program officer, program manager. So at NASA, we call ourselves program scientists. I'll get a little bit more into, I guess, kind of what I do here in a little bit. But I actually started my background in theater. That's what I originally went to university for. I quickly changed after about a year and a half. That's not quickly in university terms, but I thought that I would marry my passion for theater and meteorology and go into to on-screen as a TV meteorologist. That didn't work out. I ended up in the SOARS program at NCAR with the significant opportunities in atmospheric research and science. And I started getting really into research. And from here, I went to Colorado State University for my master's degree and then ultimately my PhD, which were in, can everybody hear me? It looks like everybody's frozen. Okay, good.
Yeah,
all right, so it just looked like everyone's frozen real quick, so I didn't know if I was talking to a room of statues. So I went to Colorado State University, and I think something that really happened here that was pretty pivotal between my master's that was in atmospheric science to my PhD, which was in ecology, is I had this moment of what I thought at the time was failure. I failed my, or I guess what I thought at the time is I failed my PhD qualifying exams. But what that ended up doing was it pivoted me into a direction that was better suited ultimately. And I didn't know this until many years later. I had many moments of doubt, imposter syndrome, thinking, you know, should I be here? I thought about quitting. I thought about the people that I didn't connect with. I may be a white presenting male, but the family I come from is a Hispanic family. I grew up in a Hispanic household. I was in a place of academia. I come from a low-income area of rural Texas. So being in an institution like academia at Colorado State University, I didn't really feel like I was able to connect with a lot of people. So there were a lot of moments of doubt, thinking I was going to quit. I had this moment where I had failed this qualifying exam. I switched degree programs, and I've got to say that was probably the best the instance that happened to me in hindsight. Of course, at the moment I was crying. I called my mentors and I was really upset, but I pivoted towards more thinking about the interdisciplinary nature of how atmospheric science, climate change, and communities all interact. I got really involved in diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. From here with the American Meteorological Society, I started working with, at the time, was the Board on Women and Minorities, which was established in the 1970s. Now I'm the chair of this board, and it's now the Board on Representation, Accessibility, Inclusion, and Diversity, or BRAID. And you can kind of imagine the elements and this visual of braiding different identities and backgrounds together. After my PhD, I ended up going to the private sector, which was really interesting. I chose not to do a postdoc. I went to the private sector to work on atmospheric models for the military. While there, I kept tracking policy and thinking about national policy and doing, larger things. And I'm really glad that Rennie just brought up congressional policy, because I was interested more in the executive branch side in terms of policy. And so when people think policy, I think especially when if they're not familiar, what they often think of is Congress. They think of legislation. But policy actually has many different meanings depending on who you ask, and that includes management and budget. So I applied for the AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowship, and that's how I ended up at NASA headquarters. And there, or here, what I do is I do a lot of, I do review panels and I work with programs as a program scientist. I work with strategy, so thinking about the future workforce development. I think about where is NASA going to be, where are our priorities for our weather satellites in the next 10 years. Recently, I've been working on a lot of environmental justice initiatives, especially as a lot of activity from the White House, from the current administration, has been coming down to the agencies. And I was kind of well suited to be able to lead these initiatives based on my background. I also deal with field campaigns. And so I'm about to leave for the next 6 weeks to St. Croix to conduct a field campaign. Some other things I do are international work. So the things I like about the job are kind of this being able to work with strategy, looking at the next 5 to 10 years, the autonomy, initiatives that come up, such as environmental justice, being able to help lead this and think about an agency strategy for moving forward. And especially, getting into things in the international stage. I would say going from the challenges that Val asked us to talk about, probably the same as what Brandon mentioned, political, especially when things, administration priorities, how they change. Also, at different levels within the agency, you have your civil servants and then you have your political appointees. If they don't always match, if there's this mismatch, you can often get some conflicting advice and guidance. And that's been interesting to navigate. And just institutional culture, just thinking about how do we change, how we might look. These are long-term changes. And so you can't be impatient, I would say, to be here. Or you can be impatient, but you're going to be at the forefront of kind of pushing these boundaries. So that's a little more about me. I love having, if you ever want to set up a morning coffee, add me on LinkedIn if you wish. I often do that, especially virtual meetings. It's really easy to do. I'd love to chat more about backgrounds, school, and policy, and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and atmospheric science. So thanks, Val, for having me, and thanks everyone for being on the call.
Thank you. And thanks for giving us the examples of relying on your mentors and how having something really difficult, extremely difficult like that ended up being an opportunity to pivot, as you say, to something that's better suited and, potentially more exciting for you. Actually, while I have everybody, the panelists, if you could please put your email, if you're willing to, into the chat, and that's one way we can share it directly with the attendees here. We have one more person who just was able to join us, thankfully, Marissa Vara at NCAR and UCAR.
Hi, thanks, Val, and I'm sorry for being late. I'm Marissa Vara. I am working now as the SOARS, funny enough that I came after Aaron, SOARS undergrad STEM coordinator, and I'm also working for NCAR E&O in their education outreach with DEI work. So how did I get here? It's a really weird, long, crazy, not that crazy, but long story. I'm a geoscience by trade. I got my undergrad degree in geoscience from University of Texas at Austin. And then I got my master's degree in paleoclimate from Louisiana State University. And I was so sure that I was going to get a PhD in this field, and so sure that I was going to continue down the research path until I went to my master's and I got a big old taste of how, to me, how toxic academia could be for me, in the sense that I am a person of color. I'm a Mexican American. I don't really fit into what a lot of academia wants me to be like. And so it was a big struggle for me to find my place and my sense of belonging in the field, that the way that it existed then. So it took me a kind of a big, huge pill to swallow to realize that that's not where my path is. And then I got back home and I started teaching because I needed to do something. And I got really more invested. I've always been invested in education, but more invested in education. I came from an outreach program. That's how it got me into geosciences in the first place. I came from Geoforce, Texas, if you've heard of that. But it's basically an outreach program to help people from rural Texas and urban Texas to get them into geology. And so it worked. I got into it. And then when I got through my undergrad and into my master's is when I realized I didn't really know if that's really what I wanted to do. I definitely still love and enjoy the geosciences, which is why I'm at NCAR, UCAR right now. But it just took me a long time to realize that the kind of research that I was doing was not the research I wanted to do. And instead I wanted to more focus on BA Jedi is what I call it: belonging, accessibility, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Everyone calls it all different things, all the same things. It all means the same thing. I got this from my mentor, who is also funny enough on this panel list, Brandon Jones. Whenever I decided to go work at NSF, also funny enough, as a science assistant, like Rennie Meyers. And he, being such the great mentor that he is, showed me that there is this whole other realm in geoscience education that I can invest my time and my efforts in, and that I can bring my experience to, and really try to make the difference that I think I needed to have for me to want to stay in academia. And so that's why I decided that I didn't, not that I didn't love research and I didn't want to be a part of that, but instead that I would want to make this environment a more belonging environment for more people like me and for people like all of you all, and to have academia kind of be just less toxic and more welcoming, to put it simply. But so that's kind of how I got here. What I do now as a SOARS undergrad STEM coordinator, I'm the proteges is what we call them, point of contact. So whenever anything happens that they want to tell us about, they contact me, and I let the team know, and then we get it all together. And then as NCAR E&O, I work with Val a lot, doing DEI workshops for the REU group, like you all. And then I help do some other DEI related things with NCAR E&O. So I kind of get to use both of my passions. I get to work with students hands-on. I get to continue doing the DEI work that I was already doing as somebody at NSF. I think the one thing for me that is challenging isn't necessarily my positions, but more of an internal struggle that I still think probably has a lot to do with my graduate experience, but other things too, is that I gained a reputation working at NSF because I was given so many opportunities to create so many things there at NSF, that I have now higher expectations for me at a new position. And it's the first time for me that I got into a position where I didn't feel like I had to prove to anyone that I belonged in this position. And it was more like I have to prove to myself that I can fill the expectations I made for myself. So it's like a weird kind of early career thing in my head that I'm like still struggling with, but I think I can do it. I know I can do it. I have a great new boss now, Kadidia, who's helping me get through a lot of this. And Val also being amazing and letting me lead workshops, like literally the first week I started working, which was really cool that like I still continue going up in a incline instead of kind of tabling off. I feel like I'm still growing, I'm still improving on myself and still helping with my own internal confidence and my own internal struggles. But anywho, that's me. I also have another thing in like 10 minutes, but I'll be around for a little bit until then. So
Oh yeah, we should actually have any questions. If you have questions for Marissa, now is the time in a minute. But like, I just want to say thank you for sharing your story. That's and you're very inspiring. It's really, I mean, it's really unfortunate that, you know, that can be how that experience is with being in graduate school. And I admire you for choosing to leave it and to try to improve things for other people. So, you know, everybody, you're hearing how people are moving, they move between different things, you know, from discipline to discipline and from type of agency to university and that kind of thing. So there's a lot more flexibility. I mean, it's just so exciting to think about, actually. So I guess I would just like to ask if anybody would like to ask Marissa questions, because she has only a few more minutes with us before she leaves. So if you would like, you could put a question in the chat. Somebody sent me a message asking, how did Marissa find her mentor? And
I got a similar question, so I'll just go ahead and answer that. I was trying to answer it in the chat, but I'll just answer it out loud. I have multiple mentors. I do definitely agree with what Erin said. Mentors are very important. I've had mentors from when I first started undergrad all the way till now. How I found my mentor Brandon was because we both worked at NSF together. He was my program officer that I worked under, basically. So we grew our relationship that way. I applied to be a science assistant, which hands down recommend, if you see the National Science Foundation science assistant position, please apply. It's a government position, but it's basically a 2-year professional development position. And the NSF, because it's NSF, you have such a wide range of where you can expand and grow and what you can like choose to be interested in. And since I chose to be interested in education and diversity, I ended up getting paired up with Brandon. And then from there, Brandon and I have had a really good relationship, I would say. I hope he would agree. Yeah, I think that's how I met Brandon. But what I would like to emphasize is stay in contact with people, network, continue to follow up with people. Don't think that, oh, you just worked them, that's the last time you're ever going to see them. Continue to just keep that relationship up, and then it helps you in the long run and helps you grow those contacts further.
Thanks.
And I'll second that on the science assistant position, and you can create a profile in USA Jobs, but be proactive about reaching out to people that you're interested in working with, both at NSF and anywhere, to ask for an informational interview and say, I've heard there's this thing called the science assistant position. You know, if you're thinking about it or you have an opening, please consider me, or send the opportunity my way, because those direct hire positions where you don't go through the kind of bonkers process that we have to get a federal position move really quickly and have different timelines. So just wanted to flag that for people.
Right. Well, thank you for that suggestion and offer. And it seems like everybody on the panel is happy to talk to anybody if you want to ask more about those, you know, whichever issues or questions you have, or, you know, things that are coming to your mind. It's pretty, and then who knows, that's part of your network building if you talk to them. Any more questions for Marissa? She's got to drop off in about 3 minutes or so. And you can unmic if you like. We love to hear people talk. Okay, well, thank you for joining us, Marissa. I really enjoyed what you told us about. And next, I will ask a question that was sent to me in the chat for Sarah. Was it difficult to transition from field to field, like discipline to discipline? And how did you do this? Did you have to catch up on education in these fields before you transitioned from oceanography to atmospheric sciences? I am currently in the meteorology atmospheric science field, but I am interested in space-related sciences.
Sure, I'd be happy to answer that. So there were certainly some challenges making the transition. Around the time that I was finishing up my postdoc with the Navy, which if any of you are considering going into a government lab, I didn't know it when I started grad school, but the Navy, the Air Force, the Army, all those guys have their own postdoc programs, which pay very well, are very prestigious, and often lead to a permanent position. But it's a good way to try out kind of what it would be like working for a government lab. So just throwing that out there, that that's something to keep your eye on if it interests you. So around the time that I was finishing up my postdoc, they did offer me a permanent research position there with the Navy. Like I said, it was on the Gulf Coast, and it wasn't quite the quality of life that I wanted in terms of my hobbies. And so I think that since I already had a permanent offer, I was a little more kind of go get them as far as looking or investigating opportunities that were in a location that I wanted. So I was perusing job sites and whatnot, and I came across an advertisement for an atmospheric scientist, my current position. But I figured it was such a long shot that there was no way that that they were going to hire me. But still, I did some background research on the company, and I would say focus on networking, your skill set, and keeping up those connections. So I actually cold emailed my current boss and said, hey, I came across this advertisement for the position. I realize it's a long shot, but I'd like to at least find out more about what you guys do in case there's a more entry-level position down the road that I might be qualified for. Because when I looked at it, I kind of broke it down to skill sets and said, well, I've got the field work experience. I've got coding experience in MATLAB for analyzing data, and I'm using optics to study particles and fluid movement in the ocean, and they're using optics to study particles and hydrometeors in the sky, which is just another fluid. So I was able to draw enough parallels to at least pique his interest. And then I said, well, I'm going to be home visiting family over Christmas break. Can I stop by the company and just kind of see the company and find out more about what you do and whatnot? And he was open to that. So that was great. In the meantime, he kind of, did some background research on me, looking into my, who I knew and whatnot. And it turned out that someone that he had worked with closely in the field, I had TA'd for graduate school. So he said, hey, can I hit her up for a reference just to find out some more about your background? And I said, yeah, sure. Well, she apparently gave me a very strong recommendation, which went a long way because he already knew her. So there's that networking. When I showed up, just, it was a meet and greet, but you still always want to show up prepared. It turned into an interview and then a job offer at the end of the interview. So, I mean, granted, they're not all going to go that way, but I'd say don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to use your network, meet Erin for coffee, connect with me on LinkedIn, feel free to ask questions. It doesn't hurt to ask someone general interest questions because it can start a conversation that might lead to something. Just don't keep your expectations and that, everyone's going to get back to you and everyone's going to offer you a job, because there's definitely, I've certainly gone through periods of imposter syndrome when, you send out emails to people and you don't hear back, or you put out lots of job applications and you don't hear back. I've heard from a lot of people that I know, when you're looking for jobs, kind of transitioning, it's best to try to find someone in your network that that's on the other side, especially if you're applying through USA Jobs or a website somewhere. You want to try to find a connection who can help surface your resume to the top of the pile or near the top of the pile on the other side, because those connections really do go a long way. So once I transitioned, there was a very steep learning curve coming up to speed on the atmospheric science that I hadn't had. I did not actually take any more coursework, but I read a lot of papers. When I had the opportunity to go to conferences, I sat in on as many talks as I could that would kind of help me gain background knowledge that I didn't have. Because people knew that I was transitioning from oceanography to atmospheric science, I used that and said, hey, I'm obviously new to this. Can you explain this concept to me? Because I'm not quite I'm not quite sure where that all comes from. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you. There's a question in the chat to me that is, which any of the panelists can answer. So this is from somebody who is currently a PhD student, and they are asking themselves if they want to continue because they don't want to end up in academia and their research is not turning out to be what they expected. Is it really worth it? The PhD, meaning will I be overqualified for work? I'm not sure, but should I consider finishing up with a master's degree instead? Do any of the panelists want to speak to that?
I can jump in. I've thought about this a lot. Like, did I need a PhD? Because like my job in mining, a lot of it was like operations oriented. I was in the field a lot, and I was also doing what I like, which is kind of like analyzing data, like analysis kind of stuff. And I probably would have been in a much different position if I hadn't spent like 10 years, doing seismology. That could have been a potential path for me. It was limited in terms of like locations where I could have lived. I'd probably be in the outback of Australia now or somewhere in Nevada. And I'm in Anchorage, Alaska, which really agrees with me. So yeah, I think that, a PhD wasn't critical to my career pathway. I'm glad that I did it, but I don't necessarily think that if you know that you don't like it and you can get a position with what you have that you're interested in, and you don't want to be in academia, and maybe you're not interested in those higher level research positions with, the national government or the federal government or the national labs, then it is worth looking at what your career options are right now, for sure.
Yeah.
Can I jump in here?
Please do.
I think that this is, that was really great response. And I guess I want to come at him from a point of where I thought about quitting, and I was going through the same piece. I think it's really, what do you see yourself doing? Thinking about like going on USA Jobs or going on to Indeed.com and thinking about what are the requirements for a position you might like. For me, I know that the thing that kept me going was that this AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowship required a PhD in a science. And that was the thing that kept me going. And I knew that after that moment, I would get to pivot. But it did require. I would also say the process of a PhD, it's emotionally taxing on top of physically taxing. And you have to weigh that out. I would say therapy is okay. You should be. Everybody on this call should be, even if you don't think you need it. Everybody should be there. But really ask yourself: is it emotionally worth it for or finances? If for some people who have families or who have to give their expected, either within their cultures or whatnot, to give back to their families who are back wherever they hailed from. I would say the process, despite it being as arduous and emotionally taxing, the skills that you do gain in terms of critical thinking, you're able to apply it to almost anything out there. I would not consider yourself overqualified. You don't have to run a lab. You don't have to do research. You can run programs. You can think about strategy. You can think about long-term. It doesn't necessarily, and it can be at a private company. It could be at multiple positions within the federal government if you wish. You can start your own business, a nonprofit. These skills I think that you get during, I think really are beneficial, but you have to ask yourself, is the emotional strain, is that worth it? So just a couple of tidbits. We could probably go on. Everybody could probably have their own inputs on this.
Yeah.
A few thoughts to share, Val.
Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Tom. I also faced that decision of go for a master's or go for a PhD, stay in academia or do something else. And I was in a zoology department at the University of Rhode Island and felt like everyone there was aiming for academia. And I was a little bit on the outside, a lot on the outside, in that I was working nearly full time at EPA at the same time and not really thinking about academia. So I turned down opportunities to be an instructor of sorts, or a research assistant or something like that. I had a job. And I also opted not to get a PhD, but to broaden myself. I had a master's in marine ecology, and I went for a master's in marine affairs to get some experience with marine law, marine geography, marine economics, all sorts of other angles that made it easier for me to talk to people about jobs in different sectors. So I shifted from the larval ecology type work that I did in my first master's degree and got into something that was almost like an MBA for the oceans or the coasts. Much broader, gave me a lot more job opportunities and gave me a lot more job satisfaction because I wasn't just addressing a piece of a problem, I was addressing it from all angles. Much more rewarding. Jules Verne in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea didn't get into marine affairs issues, but I made the choice to do that as I shifted in my career, and it was the best thing I ever did.
Yeah, and I'll jump on as well to say, I mean, I have every degree that you could want. And so, but I have to say that working in the area that I do, I see how, their surveys show that more employers prefer master's degrees generally. And I actually did lose a job at a consulting firm because somebody thought I was overqualified with my PhD. So it can happen. There are more jobs for people with master's degrees, really. That's not to say that you can't, like Jenny said, if you have a PhD, you can, and Aaron too, there are definitely, I have a PhD and I'm doing education and outreach. But one idea for exploring what is out there, because it's so hard to find out what jobs are out there when we talk about this, is a little trick that I suggest is using the web in a different way. It's putting into the search bar perhaps a couple of keywords that are interesting to you. Maybe it's weather prediction, or maybe it's storm surge in New York, and then maybe put a place name. And instead of clicking on the all button, you click on the news button. And the news button pulls up articles, current articles, where you can read about current issues. And you start to see, oh, people are still working on dealing with storm surges in New York, how to protect the city, for example, or they're looking at how to protect Miami from sea level rise. And then you can see which agencies, private companies are described in the article and who is in there. You can look them up and see, do people like working there? Use Glassdoor. And you can email people in those organizations or who were quoted in the article and ask them a question like, how did you decide on the criteria to use for a threshold? Something that relates to the issue rather than, hi, I'm looking for a job. I mean, you can introduce yourself, but it's one way to find out what's out there and start building connections. Did anybody else want to jump on that question? Otherwise, we have other questions. So there was a question about coding. How did you learn how to code, and was it difficult? I don't have the question right in front of me, but seems to be used a lot. Can you speak to that? Is it a problem if you don't know how to code?
I can speak to this since I do a little bit of programming or scripting in my job. So I learned MATLAB in undergrad in my engineering and math courses. And I took, I think, Introduction to Java and C++, which I don't really use either of those nowadays. MATLAB is fairly easy to learn. If you think you might be doing anything with any kind of data analysis, it would be good to take at least some sort of programming class. If you take a class, they're usually fairly fairly translational across different languages. There are also some free courses out there for some of the open source software packages that you could learn one of those. You know, it'd be good to at least dabble in it to see if it's something you enjoy, because some people really like it and others don't like it at all. But you know, it also depends on the job. I don't do a lot of coding. We have a couple of strictly software programmers at our company that do the majority of the programming. I just do a little bit in order to, you know, take the data that we collect, and after it's run through their very sophisticated software, to output something that's much more condensed and usable, like a, you know, it'll have a number of particles as a function of time or something. Then I take that simplified data set and I just write a little bit of code in order to plot up statistics, or, you know, look at changes with altitude or temperature or that type of thing. So it's not too difficult, but I would recommend at least dabbling in it to see if you like it.
And that's a great, and in undergrad, a final project is a great opportunity, you know, if you're looking for a little additional challenge, to maybe try to learn one of those languages as part of that, and tell your professor that you're doing that and that you're taking that initiative. And also to leverage whatever resources you have at your university to help you get through that training. If you graduate and you realize, oh, I actually do want some of that training, I don't necessarily want to get a certificate yet, see what sort of professional development funding and support your office has, or your employer has, and see if you can make a business case to them as to why it would be helpful for you to get some preliminary training there. I think everyone, in every position I've been in, I've been surprised at how much people are willing to pay to help you get the training that you need to do your job better, or to expand into areas where they think, as to Aaron's point earlier, where they want you to lead and they want you to sort of pursue what you think is a necessary skill and tool.
Yeah, good points. And I'd just like to add that if you are thinking about graduate school, that lots of times people end up spending the first year of graduate school learning how to program. And so if there's a chance that you'll need to know that, then, you know, Rennie is right on, like try to learn some in the coming year, whether that's in a course or something. There are free courses out there online.
Val, I do want to jump. I just want to, because for some people it may be daunting. I didn't grow up with, you know, computer or like, you know, coding, and you get to school and you see people, oh, I've been coding since I was 12 years old. I had a computer in my room, etc. And maybe that's more commonplace now. But that's not always the case. And I would say don't shy away from it, because also not only are you learning this skill that's very valuable, but I'm now using that. I'm an instructor on the side for teaching Python. And I completely taught myself during graduate school, you know, to code for purposes for graduate school. But now I instruct an introductory Python course. And I've got to say, I mean, it's not, you know, paying all my bills, but it's definitely helps having this, you know, extra income. And so it's very, you know, people are looking to apply any type of programming skills all over. So think about long-term as well as short-term gains for that. Mm-hmm. But also it's not as daunting as it may seem. It's more logic. And I know it may be, you know, I mean, like Val said, it's the first year of graduate school. That's where a lot of us really learn.
And I spent a year learning it in a postdoc and decided that I didn't like doing it enough. So, you know, you can find out about it that way. Thanks, Aaron. It's cool that you're teaching it now. That's impressive to me. And it sounds like fun. So Brandon has a nice comment in the chat. A topic that is not really discussed is how the different generations, and you could argue sectors, even work sectors, the different generations approach or value work. Some individuals gain their identity from their jobs. Others see their jobs as a means to fund their passions. And this last one flies in the face of the federal academic private model for work. Brandon, do you want to talk any more about that?
Yeah, sure. I'll probably get in trouble, but whatever. And when I mention academic, federal, private, I'm thinking of the traditional models of work that over those centuries, especially in Western nations. And I've noticed, well, and I started to notice this when I was at EPA. So I've been in the government almost 20 years. But I noticed with the STAR graduate fellows that I was supporting, but also the early career federal employees, of which I was one back then, and the expectations of managers and leaders within the organizations about work, and what was it process or was it outcome driven, or and then you have the intersectional overlay of cultures, of gender, of work-life balance. So all of these things, you know, I've been watching converge, and then COVID then just blew the lid off of everything, because, and there have been many articles now, people who were in, I would say, work bubbles, who just, that's all they did, and it didn't really matter that they spent a lot of time doing that as far as their lives. They were now realizing that, well, not everybody has that luxury, and it's kind of getting to what Aaron was just saying about having a computer in your house or something like that. And there are many articles out now that people just are not going back to jobs when their organizations are saying, all right, you need to come back in person. They're like, no, I'm not doing that. And so, you know, what does that mean for workforce preparation? What does it mean about your career path? And do you need, to the recent conversation, do you need an advanced degree? So many more individuals have so many more options now. When I was coming up, and maybe others, we didn't have a lot of options. So if I wanted to be an oceanographer, I wanted to be a marine scientist, I had to go this way. Now, I mean, look at the panel, you know, so I do see, and I'll close with this, sometimes I see tension, and I'll just say with older generations happen to be in certain positions, and it doesn't matter the sector, and how younger generations are saying, but I'm not doing that. I'm not, why are we having these meetings? Stop sending me emails. What are you, why? What are you doing? Leave me alone, let me do my work. And I also know that technology and tools, like Khadija just put, you know, for Python, there's open source everything, you know, so that means, back to Aaron's comment in his introduction, mentoring has changed. So the traditional models of what is expected that a supervisor provides to someone or an advisor provides to someone, they can get that on LinkedIn or an, you know, a secure, safe IG page. But so what does mentoring mean now? So all of these things play into workforce preparation, career planning, and really what you need as an individual, because it's your career and you should take ownership of it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that.
And can I add a couple things there? Is, I think, so learning the word stress culture was really helpful for me, and the term stress culture, and choosing when I engage in what seems to be urgent and when I use my own judgment as to what needs to be prioritized. Two, I chose my current job because of my benefits of, it's a Danish company, so they get months off of the year. We get the Americanized version, which is 4 weeks off. That's really great in the American economy to get that much time off. And there are other jobs in the Fed, in state government, in, you know, all across the sectors where you have to be really clear when you're looking at that job package as to what you're going to get when and how many years you have to put in before you're able to take that much vacation, and whether or not the job's going to give you the flexibility to even use the vacation you accrue. So take a good look at, if you want to work at a federal agency, how they're ranked. There are public rankings of job satisfaction and job satisfactions at agencies. When you do informational interviews, talk about workplace culture, and try to find out about accountability within the workplace when you do get there. If you're being asked to work more than you were told you're going to be asked, and you can get that sort of documented, that's one way to protect your time. And those are things that I didn't know when I entered the workforce. So I think it's important to think about and talk about when you're in the interview process.
Yeah, the culture, is it a kind culture? Do people like working there? And, you know, regardless of whether you decide that you want to do a PhD, a master's, or none of the above, but let's just say you're thinking the PhD, it's really great that you're here listening to this, because I know a lot of postdocs, so people have gone, they've done their PhD and now they're doing a postdoctoral research position, because now you need to do 4 or 5 years of that before you get a lot of the academic jobs. Is they get really nervous because there are not enough academic jobs for all of the postdocs and PhDs. And so becoming aware of the jobs that are out there through these various panels and, you know, using the web is really, it's like comforting, and it's helpful to know and to listen to how all the panelists here have moved around a lot, you know, winding paths. So I'm just saying congratulations for being here. So is there anybody, I have a couple of questions on the chat. We have about 8 minutes left, but does anybody want to unmic and ask a question?
I have a question for Rennie Meyers. My name is Margot Palucci. I'm an environmental conservation biology major at Kent State University in Ohio. Are you able to talk a little bit more about the process of sort of designing or readdressing policy as like new science and discoveries surface?
That's a great, really broad question. And I'll try to address it quickly, and you should email me and we can set a time to talk about it more in detail later, because I want to make sure we give answers that can address everybody's needs. But yeah, so the process of designing responsive policies. So I'll give a really quick lesson in public policy frameworks. So if you build into federal legislation what you think a standard should be, we should only emit so many particles of NOx or SOx into the atmosphere from these different sources. That's a really rigid framework that then becomes incredibly hard to change in the congressional policy process. So that's when you're engaging with congressional and legislation. To Aaron's point previously, the federal government does these things called rulemakings that are much more adaptive. So they'll be given the authority to set a limit, and then they will go through the scientific process, of doing their own science, of doing literature reviews, and then making that rulemaking, which is a stakeholder-driven process, to establish that standard. So my experience in the public policy space around this is that it's about responsivity to the federal agencies and how they operate and communicate what they think the best policy path forward is through their legislative affairs offices, while sort of everybody else is pushing and pulling around what they think the standard should be. But you have my email in the chat, and we should set a time to talk about it if you want to talk marine policy for sure.
Thank you.
Thanks. Nick has his hand up.
Yeah, hi, I'm Nick. I'm an undergrad at MSU. My degree focuses a lot on geographic information science and then remote sensing. Specifically, I kind of focus within water conservation and marine environments, and also around the Great Lakes. I'm doing an REU right now with Woods Hole, the USGS. And so something I've kind of found as I'm going through is I really do like field work. And so I kind of thought that maybe after leaving undergrad, I'd kind of go for an entry-level like tech position and just get some experience with that there. But I'm kind of finding as I do my REU that I really do enjoy like kind of the investigative nature of doing research. And I was just kind of wondering if any of the panelists kind of have found ways within their own careers, maybe outside of just academia or something that's entirely research focused, to kind of blend getting kind of the adventure type opportunities that you can get doing field work while also getting to try out new concepts or kind of technical applications, kind of like you would do if you were doing research.
I could probably answer this. So I'll tell you about some people that I work with. One of them, they're very highly experienced field techs. One of them got her PhD from Stanford, and now she's a field engineer. And one of them, she got her master's in glaciology, and she's also a field engineer. So they do data analysis in the off season. And I also know, I have a friend who's a professor who does not enjoy field work per se because of the heavy logistics involved, especially if you're planning and coordinating it. but he does enjoy being outside. So he does it on his own time. So there's a lot of different ways that you can navigate that, that balance between field work, what your job actually pays for, how much you enjoy being inside, vacation time, something that's part of your job, that kind of thing.
Thank you. Thanks, Jenny. It's good to hear about the variety of paths and the ways that people do this. There's a question for you, Jenny, that is, how did you, I'm trying to find the question. Oh yeah. Some of your experiences working in Alaska, can you talk about finding a new location and somebody who's considering moving somewhere else, like to an Arctic region?
Yeah, so I actually did the early part of my undergrad in Fairbanks. So I spent 3 years there. So I did know what I was getting into, even though I'm from the Southwest. So I knew that the winters are long and cold and can be quite dark, and more so in Fairbanks than in Anchorage. The summers here are stunning. It is pretty rainy in Anchorage compared to New Mexico. I would say if you're looking for a job up here, Anchorage is heavily organized towards the federal government. There's Air Force bases, Army bases, so you might get a job with the Army Corps of Engineer. The Alaska Geophysical Survey, they only hire Alaska residents, so you have to live here 1 year to get residency. There is like the USGS, there's the National Park Service, there's a lot of federal agencies, and there's also a lot of oil companies, and there's the oil pipeline, although those might be more competitive jobs to get. You can also try to get a job in Fairbanks, which is, I think it's a little bit, there are positions available at UAF all the time. Or you can get a job in industry up here. There's mining, there's oil. One thing I did want to mention, just as kind of a last statement of mine, was how I made the decision to leave academia and come to the federal government. I actually had a choice between another assistant research professor position and this position. The way I made the actual choice was to ask myself, if I pursued academia and I didn't get like the final position of assistant professor tenure track somewhere, if I failed at that, would it have been worth it? Would I be willing to pass up this position that I have now? And would I be okay with that? And the answer was no. I would have regretted that I didn't go to Alaska and work at the Volcano Observatory. And so it wouldn't have been worth it, even if I failed. If the answer was yes, like it would still be worth it if I failed, then I would have stayed in that position or moved to the new one. So that's kind of how I made my decision to change pathways, but that's it.
Thank you. So just noting and respecting time, I'm expecting that the panelists might need to all drop off, and that may be so. If any of you want to stay on, there are still more questions. People have hands raised and in the text as well. But at this point, it's fine if you do go. And I just want to say a huge thank you. This has been, I think, really a fantastic panel. And I really appreciate how much you were able to share in really short amounts of time, and to how supportive you are with the students. So thanks. And if any of you are able to stay on for a little longer, we have maybe another 15 minutes. We have a few more questions. So there's a question here. I have a question to the panelists about salary and pay grade. I'm an undergraduate student, and approaching jobs is intimidating in the sense of negotiating payment. How do you navigate what you are worth, and should we be normalizing talking about the amount of money we make?
It's such a hard question. But yes, I encourage everyone to talk about what they're making when they feel comfortable, but to start doing so with your friends where you feel comfortable. Because so much of the strategy from the offers that you get is to sort of make people feel isolated and alienated in that bubble. But how you go through the job application process really matters. So how you play up the skills and how your unique value add matters in the salary negotiation is really important. I think Val and Tom probably have some good resources they can share from some of the workshops that they've hosted as well. But on salary negotiation, there are some basic tips of the trade, and there's a book that I'll put the name of in the chat for how you negotiate that starting offer. So not necessarily putting in your preliminary application what you would expect from the position and waiting for them to make an offer. I certainly didn't know these tricks of the trade when I applied for my first job, and it's really tricky to navigate. So no, you're not alone, bare minimum.
And we can try to find some resources too, but yeah, it's you have to ask. One of the tips is never tell them what, if they ask you what do you want for a salary, you don't say, you just say, I'm sure we can work something out. You don't say, and then they offer you something. And for, this happened to me with my first job in this area, and I was shocked that it was a lot higher than what I would have asked for. So that's the main tip. So let's see.
I would also just chime in really quick. You can usually do some online searches to get kind of a rough range feel for what a position, federal versus private versus, whatnot. So do your research, obviously, before you go into the interview. Have in mind what you want in terms of salary and benefits, because benefits are, I think, one of the biggest things you can negotiate on sometimes. A lot of the federal positions, they're not going to have as much negotiation range on the salary as like a private company. The other thing, don't apply for just one position. If you walk in with an offer already in hand, you've already got a leg up on trying to make that negotiation. I've heard all the time too, don't give them a number. I was in a phone interview where they forced the issue to give a number. I said I wasn't comfortable giving a number, so I opted for a range. I gave a $10,000 range, across, because I didn't want to lay all my cards right on the table. So definitely do your research first, and don't be afraid to ask for it. Worst case, they say no, and you work it down from there.
Okay, that's good advice. Thank you. Heather Ricker.
Hi, thanks everyone. This has been so amazing so far. I'm so honored to be here and hear all of your advice and wisdom. So I actually am also at Woods Hole. So Nick is one of my coworkers. He just asked a question recently. I'm an undergrad at Skidmore College in upstate New York, where I study chemistry and environmental science. Sorry, there's a train going by. Sorry about that background noise. So I am really intrigued by and interested in a lot of the aspects of science. So I like investigating things. I like data analysis, but I'm really more interested in applied science. And I don't see myself at a desk job. I don't know if that's all that policy really is. So I guess mine is kind of a Hail Mary question, just trying to play the field and ask, are there positions available where I can be doing applied work and feeling like science that I'm doing is directly contributing to impacts and things like climate change and mitigation? Or is it more you have to pick which side you're in, either in policy and implementation or in foundational research?
Yes, any panelists, please step in.
Yeah, I can jump in from the as a Fed. So there's certainly opportunities for applied work. Many of the agencies, what we refer to in the federal family, especially the science agencies, are mission agencies or applied agencies. So NASA, NOAA, agriculture, energy, they EPA, they have labs, they have regional setups, they have field offices, et cetera, where the federal employees for that agency conduct research. And so there's those opportunities are there. The National Science Foundation is completely different because we don't conduct any research. So there are no scientists here, and there are many at NSF. We don't conduct research. We manage programs, to Aaron's point, and support and things of that nature. The facilities, major infrastructure, and all of those kinds of things. That doesn't mean there's not opportunity to engage with the community in research, sort of, when we do site visits or when we're at meetings. I think that Sarah mentioned that when we're connecting with the community at professional society meetings and things of that nature, where we can then also maybe do visits at the universities or the institutions and do field trips, blah, 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 those, but not actual research for the agency. So that's on the federal side. There are opportunities.
Mhm. And I'd like to add that, you know, I guess in organizations, you can move around a lot. I mean, at NCAR, for example, you might start out doing one kind of work and then decide you really want to explore something else, and you can sort of move sideways. So you don't have to have a plan to work in a particular job. You can find out, okay, there are a lot of different jobs at somewhere like NCAR. There's people teaching remotely. There are people doing field work, education, science, all kinds of things. So, okay, there's a nice comment from Sarah. If you're in the earth sciences, if you're a woman or identify as a woman, the Earth Science Women's Network is a great support. There's actually a job list served that's for all people, men and women and others, and that you can check. So Earth Science Women's Network, Facebook group too. And then in oceanography, Empower, M-P-O-W-I-R. Yeah. And then there was another question by somebody who may or may not still be here about they're in engineering and thinking about changing. And I guess a lot of people are asking about sort of changing careers. I'm a civil engineering student. I'm leaning into joining the oceanic sciences world. I am not sure how to transition. Do the panelists have any tips?
Well, I can chime in real quick since I switched from engineering to oceanography. So when I was in my engineering undergrad, you know, little ways through, I decided I didn't want to do straight up engineering. So I started taking some other courses to explore what I might be interested in or what I might see myself doing past that. I took a course in oceanography. I took a course in atmospheric science, you know, Spanish classes, you know, liberal arts, all kinds of stuff. I would recommend taking some classes outside your area if your schedule allows to kind of see what interests you. I did end up finishing my engineering degree because engineering degrees they're pretty easily propelled into other sciences. It gives you a great foundation in math and, you know, introductory science. And from there, you know, I sat down and I had a nice, working on those connections. I sat down and had a coffee with my engineering or my oceanography professor and said, hey, I think I am more interested in going into the ocean sciences. How do you recommend I go about this? And he sat down and chatted with me about graduate school and what graduate schools were out there for marine sciences and which ones were great and what, and gave me some professors to contact to start building that knowledge base. So work on those connections and ask questions.
Thanks. Does anybody want to unmute and ask a question?
I have one. Hi, my name is Erin Kelly. I'm here from Texas A&M at Galveston. I'm in their REU program. And one of the questions I had was, is there any sort of field you guys have been noticing that employers are looking for more often than others, like with environmental, biology? Is there anything employers are really searching for?
I mean, I'm going to make a quick plug from my new position in the private sector. There's a lot of work to do in offshore wind. We need marine technicians. We need to do site surveys. We need to continue to monitor to make sure that we're holding ourselves up to the standards that we've set for mitigation. So if you have, I don't know, you're in Galveston, I really encourage you to reach out to either a developer that you think might have some internship opportunities, or they list internship opportunities. You should email me if you're interested in this, and see what training you need to have to be able to do that, and see what subcontractors are used so you can start to get some of that entry level experience. But I'll shut up on that front.
Val, I would jump in and say, and I'll put the link in. The American Geosciences Institute, AGI, puts out an annual geoscience workforce report. There's a little cost for the current ones, but I was just looking on the site. For instance, the 2017 one is free, downloadable PDF. But every year they amass data from all kinds of sources, and they put out projections, in real time, not projections, but real time. What are the needs in the geoscience workforce by categories and by discipline and sector, and also projections for the actual number of individuals that would be needed in each of those sectors. So I would encourage you to take a look at those reports, and that'll help give you some information for decision making.
Mm-hmm. So that's AGI, and you'll put the link in there. Yeah, they are a little heavily oriented towards geology, like industry. So you might not see as much about oceanography and atmospheric sciences, but they've got lots of great resources. It's true. So I put in the chat that I think I have actually can access the emails from the Zoom, and so we can send you or your internship leaders the contents of the chat, link to the recording of this, and some other resources. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming. And I know some of you arrived late, so we'll make sure to get you the recording. So if you're interested in hearing from the panelists, the ones who might not have heard their introduction, that might be helpful for you. Thank you so much, everybody, and hope you have a great day. And thank you, panelists.